Well, thank you all for coming out. My name is Joel Smithy. I am the Parks and Recreation Director for Deerfield Township, and we definitely want to thank everybody for being here tonight. So we are working on our third workshop. This is the third of four, so we have this one, and then we have another one coming up next month, so we hope that everybody is able to come out for that one as well. We also have our consultant, which is Wolford, and then the folks who did our survey, which is ETC. They will both be doing presentations tonight to lead you through all the information that we have. And then once they get done with their presentations, we will be going around to the various boards in the room and showing everybody what we have and then asking for comments. So you'll take markers, you can write on the boards and tell us what you think on each one of those boards. So a lot of information to give out tonight, and then a lot of things we'd like to get from you all to tell us what you think about the plans and what could happen in different parks. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bruce, and Bruce will get started on getting us through the first part.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Is the screen visible for everyone? I'm down on a low angle, so it's not as easy to see. Our agenda tonight, after the introductions that Joel did, we're going to talk about our findings today. Some of you have been to the other two workshops, some of you haven't, so we'll review that quickly. And then we have, well, some of that's going to be new information on the findings because it wasn't ready for workshop 2. And that's going to be the more interesting part of it. The statistically valid survey, we've got preliminary results on that. We've got a little bit of analysis on operations and particularly programming of the park. So once we get through us talking, the rest of the meeting is for you, and we've got 4 stations set up around the room. We're calling them planning sessions 1 through 4, but we're going to take on the community parks, and we'll give you a little bit of a discussion about park classification, what's a community park and a neighborhood park. Talk about the community parks. We'll talk about a couple of unique ones. One's really a neighborhood park, and the other's county park, but it's turning out that it's one of the more important township parks for the township residents. And then we talk about open space and connectivity. It's becoming a very important issue as we're getting feedback through the survey and the website. And the last one is Kingswood. We'll let that one stand alone because that's where all land. It's had a lot of discussion about it, and it's important to get that right. So we're going to break up into a couple of groups and then work around the room and give you a chance to actually mark on the drawings. You can make notes on the pad. You'll see where we're going with this. If you go to the next slide, please. What we want to do is compile from this a list of new programs and facilities at each of these parks that this group, thinks might really make some sense after hearing what we've heard in the survey and what we've been learning. And then if you feel so moved to take a marker and start marking on these areas, some of the areas that you think might be good for something different from what's there or we want to protect. So it's the beginning of the concept development for the parks. And the last piece, which we're hearing is important, is some concepts for how this township can get connected by multi-use paths, bikeways, walkways, a little bit better than it is right now. And then there's sort of a fourth one up there, fourth bullet. Is there anything else you want to get on the table? Go to the next slide. Quick overview of how this project is proceeding. We started in April of 18. And the first thing we did was we started working with focus groups, which were selected to try to touch all of the different interest groups in the township to give us a lead into what we needed to think about. Paralleling that, we sent our teams out to do a physical inventory of all the parks to see what's there, see the condition it's in, and look at how they're being used. We were also studying the demographics and the demographic trends for this community so we can now benchmark that against other similar communities. And soon after we got started, we got into public engagement. What was our first meeting? Was that in June? Yeah. And that one was introducing the process and getting some initial feedback. We'll give you a summary of that here in a minute. We had a second one in August. This is the third. The fourth one's coming up at the end of November. We started the statistically valid survey. It's a mouthful, but what it means is a scientifically designed to tap the residents of the community and get a cross-section of the population that is truly representative of the entire community. Whether it's people who use parks every day, who never use the parks. So this is valid to within less than 5% error, 96% probability. So if something says 62% of the township wants A, whatever it is on the list, if you went out and asked everybody in the township, you'd be within probably 60 to 65% of the township would say the same thing. So it's a very, very useful tool. We call it quantitative data. What we're doing tonight, what we're doing with the website and survey on the website is called qualitative data. That's where you get face-to-face with people. You see their passion, you see their concerns, and we collect that data and weigh that in the equation as well. What you want, what you talk about here tonight. That's where the workshops come in. We get all this together tonight. We'll come back with a preliminary draft master plan at the end of November that we will vet in front of another workshop group. And there you get a chance to pick apart, work on it, tell us what you like, what you don't like, and that will get refined. So by the end of December, we'll have a draft plan for the trustees to look at. And the idea is to review that thoroughly and be a trustees meeting, another public meeting in reality, and try to approve it in February. So that's where we're going. It's pretty important. This is a pretty important workshop, so we're really glad to see you. Sure.
So this, as Bruce said, this is the third workshop that we've had, and the workshops are very important, and they're a big part of our public engagement. Can I see by a show of hands of how many folks have participated in the previous two workshops? All right, good. So welcome for those of you that have not been here. The first workshop, as Bruce said, we were really just trying to understand what the public wanted. So we're really just collecting information, and I'm not going to go through the details of it. You can kind of read some of the bullet points here, but overall, Deerfield Township is doing a very good job with our parks. The parks are well maintained, clean, the offerings are very good. And there's also some unique opportunities that we have here in Deerfield with specifically Kingswood Park. But really, there's opportunities within all the parks. So the first workshop, really, we just understood what the public kind of thoughts were and perceptions of the park system, so that helped inform us as we start to develop the plan. You can go to the next slide. So the second workshop, we started getting into a little bit more specific. So what is working within Deerfield? What is not working within Deerfield? So again, we presented the findings from our first workshop, the focus groups as well. We did have meetings with focus groups. So these are two components to the public engagement. The second workshop, we presented that information back, made sure we heard the folks during the first workshop and the focus groups. And then we really just started kicking around just different ideas. Again, understanding what's not working, what is working, and really how we can improve the parks. So we got some specifics with those, and really the details and our meeting minutes from the workshops are on the website, so you can get in there and look at those. We've also provided the meeting minutes here as a handout, so you can refer to those as well. And just for a lack of time, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan, and he's going to go over the next part of our public engagement, which is the community survey.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to stand up here so I can get my notes in front of me as I'm doing this, if that's all right. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, we good? So my name is Ryan Murray. We can go to the next slide. I'm with ETC Institute. We're a nationally recognized market research firm. We do this kind of work all over the country. We work a lot with pros. So our relationship is really close and firm, and we know what each other are doing, and we kind of can, Austin probably built most of his stuff, predicated on knowing what I'm doing already. So that's who we are. I'm here to present some of the results. If anybody's got questions, just let me know.
I want to be a little.
Yeah. Okay. Is this on? No? Am I good? Is this better?
Yeah, it's good.
All right, sorry. So basically, the purpose of our surveys are to objectively assess satisfaction, needs, all that kind of stuff for a wide range of programs and facilities. We help determine priorities for the community as part of the township's efforts to plan for the future of parks, and that's really what the survey is for and what we're doing here. And then we like to identify opportunities for the township, to better serve leisure and recreation needs, and that's what our survey research has done here. The purpose, again, or the methodology, let's go to the next slide. A 7-page survey. It was the first one we've conducted for the township. It was primarily by mail, so we randomly select a sample, we mail out those surveys, and then we do phone and email follow-ups to kind of reach our goal. However, for this project, it was super easy. We achieved 458 surveys, I believe, which is about 158 over our goal. So it really, we sent about 2,800 or so, I believe, and that I don't have right on me, so.
It was somewhere between 28 and 3,000.
Yeah.
I don't remember the final.
Right around there. So excellent response rate as well. Like Bruce said earlier, we have about a 4.6% margin of error at the 95% level of confidence for the results. So everything, plus or minus 4.5% or so.
Is that the same survey that was online?
It was the same structure, but the public did have an opportunity to take that survey. We would call that the non-random sample results. The results that we collected at ETC and the results that I'm presenting here are the random sample survey results, meaning that we randomly selected respondents, mailed surveys, and then got a representative sample back. So most of our results are representative of household type, age, gender, those types of things.
How many did you get returned? Did you say
458. Yep.
Now, the survey that's online now, that's going to be recorded. That's part of the data for this project, but it's more qualitative. It gives us a sense of kind of the pulse of the community, whereas the statistically valid data, that's numerically accurate across the whole community, but you kind of want to get both to make the package work.
Yep. Next slide for me. Thank you. Overall satisfaction, this is just a summary kind of the findings and what I found interesting. Overall satisfaction is very high. 74% of respondents were very satisfied or satisfied with the job that the township is doing with Parks and Recreation. Maintenance and number of parks and the quality and number of fields are two of the items that receive the highest levels of satisfaction overall. The biggest obstacle to usage is just not knowing what's offered. That's something I'll kind of get into in a little while, but it's just something to keep in mind as we kind of work through the results. And then most respondents, 58%, would be supportive of the township exploring some kind of multi-purpose or a community building of some sort. So a majority of respondents are interested in the township at least exploring that option. Next slide for me. Okay, there we go. Amenity priorities, and I'll get into the details and the methodology of this, but just as kind of a precursor. Walking trails, biking trails, green space and natural areas, nature center, sledding hills, and neighborhood parks are kind of the amenities that are the highest priority for the community based on needs and unmet needs. So if your household has a need, and then how well the township's currently meeting those needs with their current offerings. For programming, nature programs, adult fitness and wellness programs, community special events, family programs, and a senior fitness or wellness program. Those are, again, the programs based on need and how well the need is currently being met by the township. Those are the items that are, again, of highest priority. Our first topic is the usage of parks and facilities. And I kind of picked apart the survey, broke it up into a few different topics, and I'll present each topic separately. 83% of respondents indicated they used at least one park or facility during the last 12 months. That's very high. Typically, in that 80 range is a very active community. Anything below that, we would say, that community is just not as active, or they're using different facilities or parks from throughout the region. But here we found that 83% of people are using Deerfield Township facilities. Next slide for me. Quality condition of parks. So those people that indicated they'd used one of the parks or facilities offered by the township were then asked to rate the quality of that facility or park. Overall, the condition of parks is very good. As you can see, the blue items on the screen, those blue bars are excellent or good responses. Yellow is a fair, pink is a poor response. As you can see, there's very little pink, a slight amount of yellow, but for the most part, people are very satisfied with the condition of all the facilities they visited. Next slide for me. Program participation. Farmers market special events programs, nearly every household could use those programs, so that's why we see that they had the highest usage, regardless of age and ability or any kind of special need or anything like that. Most respondents in the community can get out and use a farmers market. Special events are the same way. Even people with small children can get out for special events. Then we see it kind of tapering off. Cultural arts, maybe just not really a perception, but just an interest type thing, you know. That's probably why we see it dip. Community youth athletics, not all households have youth, so that's why we see the numbers dip there as well. Going down to family programs, adult programs, 50-plus programs. Farmers market and special events are those programs that a majority of households can use and do use. Next slide. Quality of recreation programs and activities. So again, for those people who had participated or attended a program or an event, we asked them to rate it. Again, the blue on the screen is positive, the yellow is a neutral or fair rating, and then the red is poor. Only 1% indicated that any of the programs or activities they participated in were poor. So again, you know, it was like 80%, pretty much 9 out of 10 participants. So if you had somebody participating in a program, if you lined 10 of them up, only one person would indicate they weren't satisfied. Next one is barriers to usage, and this is what I kind of brought up in my summary. This is something that I really like. This is kind of my favorite questions on surveys, both for parks and community survey research. I think aligning the communication methods is very important, and it can improve participation, it can improve satisfaction, it can reduce angst. If a township is able to communicate effectively with residents in a way that they most prefer, you're going to see participation rates rise, you're going to see satisfaction rates rise, and it's overall good for both the township and the constituents. So the largest number here that we see at the top, the 36%, is I don't know what's being offered, and that's really the largest barrier to people not participating or using facilities or programs offered by Deerfield Township. Although it's not a large number, it is notable. Not understanding what's being offered is a large barrier and something that's really easy to overcome and improve usage or improve participation. Being too busy is always one of those ones we see at the top. About a quarter of respondents indicated they're just too busy to use, and then everything just kind of tapers off from there. If we go to the next slide, we then get into the sources of information that respondents use to learn about parks, recreation programs, and activities. Primarily, people are getting their information from friends or neighbors, which I call word of mouth. Although this is a good source of information, not everybody is exactly in tune, and maybe your neighbors aren't in tune. So having that be a primary source of information is not ideal. But what we see is only 33% or 34% do word of mouth, 33% get their information from the Deerfield Township. So based on not the previous slide and respondents telling us that they're not sure what's being offered, and then also the Deerfield Township website being one of those main sources of information, better promoting that website or making that information more easily available, or even creating a separate Parks and Recreation website where that information is specifically Parks and Rec, could really boost participation. It could increase overall satisfaction because people are aware of what's going on. People know where to find the information easily, and then they can access and participate more readily or more easily. As we kind of scroll down the list, park signs and boards are always things that people get information from if they're available. The activity guide or programming catalog is always important. And then we're on the important slide here. So these are the most preferred sources of information. The township website and the activity guide or program catalog are definitely the most preferred sources. So again, that's where I was kind of leading into either bolstering or improving the communication methods from the website can go a long way in promoting the township's recreation opportunities overall. If we go to topic 4, this is where we get into our priority investment ratings. We can go to the next slide here. I don't know, show of hands, how many people completed a survey here? Did anybody get the survey or take it online even? We first asked respondents to indicate if you have a need for one of these programs. Based on those who have a need, we then, if we go to the next slide, ask respondents to indicate how well the township is currently meeting that need. All those red bars indicate that the township is not meeting the need very well. It's not a negative, it just means that the households believe that their need is not being met. And if we take a look back at one of those other slides, again, we said people just aren't sure what's offered. So understanding that maybe the needs and the high levels of red on this chart are more so an understanding of what's being offered rather than the township not performing at a high level. And I don't think that's what these results indicate whatsoever. So after we've asked need, we then estimate the number of households that whose needs are being met either 50% or less. So on that previous slide, we were asking how well the township was meeting needs: 175, 50, 25, and 0%. Based on that, we can get an unmet needs rating for recreation programs, and this is predicated on the highest. Everything's basically compared to the highest level of unmet need. So what we found is nature programs, adult fitness and wellness programs, community special events, are really the top 3 items whose respondents indicated their needs just aren't being met 100%. And we can move to the next slide for me. This is our unmet needs rating slide. 100% is always going to be the highest rating on this slide. That's just the item that had the highest number of households indicate their need was not being met at 100% or 75%. If we go to our next slide, we then asked respondents to indicate which one of those programs are most important to their household. So what we do is we weigh need, how well the need's being met, with the importance. If an item is not important, it's not going to top our list. And the reason being is that we basically want to tell the township how to get the biggest bang for their buck. Which of these programs or facilities are going to have the greatest influence on the most number of households, and that's how we want to look at this. So if we go to our next slide, we do an importance rating. Again, nature programs was the highest item on the list, followed by community special events again, family programs, adult fitness and wellness programs, and those were really the top 4. And if we go to our next slide, we'll have our priority investment rating. Things in red are indicated as high priority, or things that will have the largest or greatest impact on the community as a whole. Things in blue are those medium priority items, and things in green are those lower priority items. So what we found is nature programs, adult fitness and wellness programs, community special events, family programs, and senior fitness and wellness programs are the programs in the community that if we were to invest in them more heavily would have the greatest benefit for the largest number of constituents. Again, nature programs, adult fitness and wellness programs, community special events, and family programs are all things that a high majority or a majority of households in the community could access readily, without any regard to ability or age for the most part. If we go to our next slide, this is program or priorities for amenities. So we did this for programs. We also did it for amenities, or I like to say facilities most of the time, so I might slip and say facilities. What we find first is that walking trails is the item that the greatest number of households, 76%, had a need for, followed by green space and natural areas, neighborhood parks, community parks, biking trails, playgrounds. Sort of those things that everybody could potentially have a need for in their family or in their household. Then again, we ask how well your needs being met. As we see, there's a large clump of unmet needs towards the bottom. Those kind of start with senior activity space, skateboarding parks, sledding hills, indoor meeting space. And I want everybody to understand that this is predicated on the number of households that indicated they did have a need. So you were only asked to rate these items on how well your needs being met if you indicated your household had a need. So some of these items that had a large number of unmet need or a large number of red on the slide may not actually pan out to be the highest priority because only a few households even had a need to begin with. The main example would be skateboard parks. A small number of households have the need for skateboard parks. The need may not be currently met that well. So we see a lot of pink on that slide. I think it's 63% or so. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's a high priority for the community, but it is a high priority for a small number of households. And again, we estimated the number of households whose needs are being met 50% or less. And then we get our unmet need rating. We found that nature center, walking trails, sledding hills, biking trails top the list. That trend is going to continue when we move on to the importance slide, where we find walking trails, neighborhood parks, biking trails, green space, and natural areas, community parks, all top the importance list. Primarily walking trails, which is pretty common nationwide. Then if we go to our importance rating, walking trails kind of blew everything out of the water, which I think is important to note. 100% or the highest item was walking trails. Neighborhood parks fell to 52.6, followed by biking trails, green space, and natural areas. And then if we go to our PIR rating, or our priority investment rating, we found that walking trails, biking trails, green space and natural areas, nature center, sledding hills, neighborhood parks are really those items, again, the biggest bang for the buck. And just to be clear, when I say that, it's just these are the items that if we invest in or if we prioritize in the community, the most or the greatest number of households are going to benefit from that. Then if we go into 6, improvement priorities, we also asked some questions about, what actions could the township take to improve Parks and Recreation system overall? The blue lines, again, are very supportive or supportive responses, falling to not sure responses in yellow and not supportive in pink or red. Protecting open and green space is the item that received the largest number of supportive responses, followed by existing or upgrade existing parks, increase connectivity, and then upgrading park facilities. It's kind of a trend that Bruce and I were talking about before the meeting began. The township is very interested in green space, connectivity, walking trails, natural amenities that don't take a lot of development. And that could be a plus or a minus depending on the type of facility that you run. What's that?
They don't take fuel.
Yeah. So, either the community is green-minded in that sense, or they notice what they have and they want to protect it. And that's where I kind of saw the results moving as I wrote the report here. We then asked which of those actions that you were supportive of are most important to your household. We always like to gauge support or importance followed by a second response. And it's important to us. We feel that people can be very supportive of multiple items, but then when you're asked to gauge your importance, you're more selective. So people can really overestimate satisfaction, but then when we ask about importance, we get a little bit more down-to-earth response. And that's what we see here. Increased connectivity to hiking, walking, biking trails, acquiring or preserving property to redevelop into parks or additional shaded areas, trails, picnicking, etc., protecting open space and green space, upgrading existing parks, and upgrading park facilities. So people are really interested in what we have and what's currently being offered, protecting it, using it appropriately, and then just a small amount of upgrades is what I saw. We had some questions about Kingswood. I know it's contentious, so we'll kind of go through this. Just keeping in mind that there is a margin of error on all these results. This is not the end-all be-all of what should be done or could be done to Kingswood. These are just suggestions based on survey results and how people responded. So again, we asked level of support for potential options for Kingswood, and we gave a variety of options for people to respond to. The two options that stand out are improving Kingswood as a passive public park. About 69% of people selected that item. We're creating a permanent farmers market facility in Kingswood Park. Farmers market was one of those priorities that was very high up on the list, so it makes a lot of sense that this item received a lot of support. But improving Kingswood as a passive public park was kind of the theme for all the Kingswood questions. If we go to the next slide, this is level of support for actions taken at Kingswood that would generate revenue. We asked another question that I'll get to the slide to in a little bit about what kind of commercial development we want to see in Kingswood. This, I think, goes in line with that. The item that received by far the highest level of support was equipment rentals in parks, which keeps the park passive as a passive use space. But then, renting, there is some water on the park grounds, maybe kayaks, bikes, if there are paved paths, roller skate rentals, things like that. So it wasn't high support for development, but it was high support for use, or at least the potential for improving that into a more structured park, whereas right now it's just kind of an open space. They also said non-Deerfield classes or programs for using parks or hosting large events that have exclusive use of a park or may charge an entry fee. Those items received less support, but still over half. This next question is a little weighted, and when I say that, it's a difficult question to respond to on a survey, in my opinion. This question basically said, should a portion of the debt-free Kingswood property be sold or leased for commercial development? And if so, which of the following commercial development options would you most favor? The large red item on there is 51% indicated that they would like to not, or 0% commercial development at Kingswood Park. So a majority of respondents indicated they would not like to develop Kingswood Park commercially. And that's really the theme of most of the results, keeping it passive. If we look at other results that are not directly related to Kingswood Park, it's still mostly about passive park usage in the township. There was some support for some commercial development, and what that exactly means, the survey just can't quite answer, and that's why we do these type of public forums and public meetings to kind of get a better idea of what commercial development really might mean for Kingswood Park or for any parks in the community. 17% indicated none of the above. We talked about this briefly. There's another percentage. This chart is excluding the non-provided responses. When we factor in the non-provided responses, roughly 25% of people didn't give an answer to this question. They didn't select any of the percentage items. And then if we factor in the not provided responses, it was about 49% didn't want any commercial development whatsoever. So that's where these public forums really can come in handy to kind of fill in the blanks. But this is a really good starting point on understanding.
But that was an option, none of the above.
Yep.
So are you saying that option was picked 17% and then you
Yes.
added in how many people didn't answer it at all?
Nope, this chart right here is excluding the nobody answered
Oh, okay.
options. Yep. So
I was confused, sorry.
we had about 458 responses. About 100 people either selected none of the above or did not answer the question. And professionally, what I think is that either there was not enough information, they didn't feel confident in answering the question in any particular way, or they didn't like any of the
Well,
options.
How do we know how much of the part of Kingswood is debt-free? You didn't really define that as the 30 acres, the 70 acres, the road.
And that explains the high percentage of none of the above or no answers, I think.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you better define passive park or passive? Yes.
Bruce might be better acclimated to answer that question. I don't want to overspeak. It can mean a variety of different things depending on where we are.
Yeah, and also ask Austin, you might supplement what I'm saying, because the two, we play off each other on this. And there's a certain point where passive it's a category or a term, but a passive park might be just trails, an open space, maybe a place for picnicking, but I'm not sure somebody running 3 miles around their park is totally passive. So when you think passive, it doesn't mean there isn't activity going on, but it's basically natural systems oriented, things like fishing, picnicking, as opposed to sports and active, competitive games, things like that. A playground, you can put a playground in a passive park. You can also put a playground in an active park. It's a whole lot different playground. Anything to add?
Yeah, active-wise would be like programming space.
Yes,
So you're
right,
mostly
yeah.
trying to activate the space of programming in large gatherings, where passive could be, it's more indirect use of the space. So active, think of actively programming the actual space.
The passive park is sort of self-programmed. You go there and you do what you want to do.
Yeah, self-directed versus somebody kind of directing you for the activities.
So if we go to the next slide, we had just some additional findings. These are just questions that didn't seem to fit neatly in one of my categories, but I think they're important. This slide specifically, Deerfield currently has a non-renewable parks tax levy. We asked respondents to indicate how supportive they would be of turning that into a permanent levy. 54% were either very supportive or somewhat supportive. Most of those you could vote when, if it came to a vote, most of those people you would expect to vote yes. Whether or not they do vote is a question that is unanswerable. 19% were neutral. From experience, what we say is about half of those neutral responses could fall positive. We're not sure where the other half would fall. Again, we can't predict if that 19% is going to vote or if they're not. And what we always worry about is that when we have a majority such as this, 54%, we're always worried that those majority people are going to think, why wouldn't we want this to become a permanent tax levy? I'm not going to even go vote because everybody's going to vote yes. So what I draw from this is that an educational campaign would be needed to, kind of solidify these results into actionable polling data. You would need to educate the public on what you're really voting on, how it would function, how it would work, how it would be structured, and then, poll on that. So this is a really good baseline, and it's very supportive of the fact that we could turn it to, go ahead.
Yeah, so when does that expire? When does that come up for renewal?
2022.
Yeah.
When?
2022.
And what are most of those funds used for?
Most of those funds are used for, as with most budgets in government, are used for salaries, maintenance, and taking care of the parks. Acquisitions, a little bit, but mostly just maintenance and cost for employees, mowing, cutting grass, just any type of maintenance you could think of.
And just over a quarter of these responses were not supportive. Those are the respondents that you won't sway one way or the other, most likely. it would be very difficult to say that we have about 25% here that said they wouldn't be supportive. If we took it to a vote, I would say at least 25% are not going to vote yes at the end of the day. And if we move on to our next slide, this is where we kind of get into the meat of it a little bit, in my opinion. We asked those respondents who indicated they weren't supportive as to why. Understanding how supportive people are is great, but if we don't know why people are not in support of it, then we can't push the initiative forward at all. So the number one answer, and this is quite common in these types of questions, almost 40% of those respondents who indicated that they wouldn't vote for it or were not supportive of it indicated that they just need more information, and that's why I do think that an educational campaign would be very useful, not only in educating the public, but then also being able to poll after that to see if our numbers changed. If you educate the voter base on the item and then you see the numbers drop, then we understand that a lot more people just needed more information before they could definitively say yes or no. We also saw 37% did not support any increase. On the previous slide, 25% of people were not support, so 37% of those are never going to vote for this. Where the other numbers lie, that would kind of be up in the air, just as any election could be. 22% believe the township currently has sufficient recreation opportunities, does not need secured funding. A lot of people have that opinion nationwide when we ask these types of questions. It's just a pretty common sentiment. People think that things are great now, why change? And then the other items kind of taper off, and when we're talking about 16% of 25%, we really start to taper off, and the results are kind of hard to plan on. But 16% said, I do not want any Deerfield Township parks, amenities, programs, or activities. They don't use them, so there's a small percentage that just don't use, and that's the reason that they wouldn't support a permanent tax fixture. And then another 16% said basically they want users to pay, and that's a common sentiment nationwide as well. Another 12% were other, but like I said, 12% of 25% is just really difficult. You're not going to develop any kind of consensus as to why they were not supportive of the item based on those types of numbers. So we already kind of went through some questions, but if anybody has anything else, I'd be happy to answer, and feel free to submit questions and they can pass them along to us as well.
Did all of your answers contribute to what our drawings are tonight?
I think that most of everything that's going on tonight was predicated after or developed, in conjunction with the survey results. And I was keeping Bruce informed as they were coming in, and I got them the results as soon as we possibly could. But again, Bruce would be the best to answer that.
Now, we don't have much in the way of proposals yet, but we've tried to we've grouped the parks to give you something to get your teeth into tonight. So we're not really at the recommendations stage yet. This public review of the survey is going to help us to really solidify that.
Yeah. One of the major takeaways is that ETC Institute is a national leader in this type of research. When we do our sampling procedures, they're very precise. We mail out an appropriate number of surveys to receive an appropriate number of surveys back. I would have expected, maybe 320, 325 surveys to come back on the way that we sampled, and to have 458 just kind of blows us away. So the community is super involved. These results are much stronger because of how involved everybody is. And I think that goes a long way in kind of using this as a basis to begin planning. I think Bruce would attest to this. Survey results are great, but a lot more planning needs to go into anything before proposals are developed. So. And I saw another question back there.
Yes, I have a question. What question did you ask on the survey where people said none of the above or don't know anything?
It was question 20.
And what was that question?
It was how much commercial development would you like to see in Kingswood Park? And it was 0%, 20, 40, 60, 80, or none of the above.
Okay, was there any part of the survey that asked people what is Kingswood or where it's located? Because I heard of Kingswood, but I don't know a lot about it. I know there's a farmer's market. I know there's a cross-country team that practices there. I know it was the old golf course. So was there a part where you tried to ask people what Kingswood is or where it's located? Because I noticed that one of the parks here is Carter Park, and I have not heard of that before.
You're bringing up one of the points that we discussed at some length in putting the questionnaire together. And one thing we had discovered in the focus groups was that part of this is geographic. The township is fragmented. The people in parts of the township don't know much at all about any of the other parks. And so, but trying to plug that into the survey would have been really additive, and probably wouldn't reveal a lot to us in terms of what people don't know. But what it did point out, even before we got to the survey, is what the exercise tonight is about, is to try to expose at least as many people as we can in this room, and then through the documentation of the proceedings on the website, to the resources in the whole township. Each of the stations you go to has, for reference, a map of the whole township where you can see where all those parks are. And it's not surprising when it's fragmented like this that you may not have even heard of one of the other parks. And then next to it will be one or two or three parks of a certain type, with a nice aerial photo where and a list of what's in the parks. We have one of the handouts tells us what's there, so you get a little bit of an introduction, and then it's just natural in any of these, even where people know all of the park sites, they're going to focus on the ones they know best. And so, but as someone who, let's say, doesn't know Carter, when we start talking about Carter, it's an opportunity for you to learn a little bit about it and ask some questions. Well, why couldn't this is all woods here? Why couldn't we develop, a nature trail system? I'm just throwing, So even if you don't know the park, what we find in these meetings is that actually that fresh eye, someone who's just learning about it, can overcome stereotypes and some, more rigid thoughts. So we didn't try to get to that through the survey, but what we found in the focus groups was just what you were saying, people don't know. And that the format for this meeting, in fact, is structured around that fact to try to expose everybody as much as we can to all of the park resources, and let some people who don't know anything about one or two of these parks to look at it for the first time with a fresh eye, say, well, gee, I just heard this session, what about? So that's where we are with it. It's a good question, and it's a challenge in this township. Yes?
Yeah, one of the points that came out was the need for walking paths and bike paths.
Yes.
Are those on the maps?
What is already mapped is on the overall map. What's already in place. Now, there is Southwest, the Trails Alliance, Southwest Ohio, has some projected paths, and we thought about putting that in, but I've been working with that group now for a couple of years, and those proposed routes move a little bit as communities start to develop. But the structure, what Mason has, the county has, township has, is up there. And you can begin to see some patterns working from that. But one of the most important things, and what the Trails Alliance did in their workshops, was to have people look at the plan and say, well, we've got this destination, that destination, that destination. We've got to find a way to connect them. And then you start looking at the neighborhoods that that, like, we as planners don't know too well. That's part of what's going to go on over in that corner. To talk about that a little bit. So you'll see what's existing, but in the context of the whole township, so you can look at, from your knowledge of neighborhoods and destinations, some of the, rights away, we had people show up and say, well, doggone it, there's a whole overhead utility line through here, we can use that. Most of us may have never seen it, but somebody in the group might know about it. So that's how we want to start to dig that out. Yes?
How did they decide that Kingswood has the possibility of economic development versus other parks?
It's brand new statement. It's
Well,
only been
there's-
developed as a park in the last,
A year, 6 months, people?
So Kingswood was purchased a little while back. It was purchased as an opportunity for us to take a property that was possibly annexed Township. At that point, there was no clear direction. We just didn't want to lose that property. So it was just sitting vacant, and at some point, the township did call it a park. So it kind of took on the name of Kingswood Park. And through that process, a lot of things started happening there. Bicycles were using it, cross-country runners were using it, people were using it as like public safest dog park in Warren County. So it was being used for several things that gave you a park-like setting, but it never really was intended possibly to be a park by the board in place who actually purchased it. It was more, they purchased it and they were looking to do something that could be partially park, partially development. So it was something that the initial thought was just to preserve the land in the township. So through the years, and we purchased it in 07, and, 06, 07 we ran it as the golf course for 1 year, and then after that, we discontinued the golf course, and that's when it sat vacant. And we did use it for several different things, cyclocross events, cross-country events. People could come there and use it for the walking paths. Anthem right across the street, a lot of people use that for the pathways in there. So it did get a lot of use, but it was, when it was looking to be developed, that's when it started getting a lot of interest in it staying a park setting. It was never a park by name, it was more of a park setting.
A wide road was put through the middle of the park, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And the reason that road was put there was they were thinking of developing on both sides of the road, is that correct?
That was a thought that it could develop, but that was in place prior to that. That was part of the thoroughfare plan for Warren County. So that dates back, back to the early mid-90s, I guess.
1998.
98, okay. So that was supposed to go through there at some point to alleviate some of the traffic congestion from Duke Boulevard, from all the big buildings there, and it's supposed to carry some traffic from P&G as well. So the road, while it was didn't have to go through, it wasn't something that just came up last minute. It was something that was planned for years ago. It was conceptually shown on drawings to be a road going through Kingswood Park, or Kingswood.
The other thing, the main concept of the whole idea is if a vehicle, a large accident happened on the freeway, you have a way to get move them north and south. There wasn't any way to do that before without having planning. So the road was planned as in case of emergency, a tractor trailer with fuel or whatever. It gave them a plan to essentially go from Kings Mill Road all the way down to Hillsborough to the whole county. That the road would, you could divert traffic off of the highway.
Yeah. Well,
So it was more a Warren County plan.
it was
Yes.
the engineer's office. It was part of their.
It was Warren County, Deerfield, Mason, it didn't tie, it came out, it was, the Innovation Way actually was there before, we purchased the park. The idea was to carry it through the golf.
So definitely good points there, but with that being said, we would like tonight to focus on the road is there and it's not going to go away. So looking at the north and the south side of Kingswood, just to see what opportunities may be for either side of that. So the past history kind of was kind of different for different people, but now the road's there, and that's some of the discussion that we'll talk about tonight. Is where do we go from here? We know the road's there. We know what the survey has told us, and we want to hear from the folks here in the room tonight. So we will get to that point where we talk to everybody in the room and get everybody in the room to talk about that. So, I think you had a question as well, sir.
Yeah, we've done the surveys and been to the meetings and stuff like that, and I don't remember seeing or discussing expenditure of building a new administration building or a new sheriff's building or anything like that? Do we not have that already existing? Does Deerfield Township not have a police station or an administration building?
That's a very good question. And that's something that we did want to talk about as well for Kingswood. So going back to the conversation with the road, kind of halfway through Kingswood Park, the thought is the northern part of the property would remain for park use as far as, you know, open space, green space, whatever you want to do for the park section of it. But the south part of it could lend to an administration building for the township. The community building would be part of that as well, and the park maintenance building, which is already there, and the farmer's market. What that does, it allows us to move from our current location, which is a rented facility on Parkway Drive. So we're right next to Lowe's Home Improvement. That building houses the administration building and the sheriff's department. So those are areas that we currently lease. If we were able to build an administration building that housed both of those, it would long-term save the township hundreds of thousands of dollars and open up our current site, which is a very valuable site, to other development opportunities that could be better for that location than what it currently is. So,
What happened to the building on Townsley or Townley or whatever that little administration township building used to be? It was red brick across from Rusty's Bucket, Randy's Bar.
yeah, that is, that building has been turned into a public works building. So it was a fire station, and then we had part of it for administration building. So that building has been torn down and is now a public works building and a maintenance building right next to it. So
Was it township owned?
Yes, it is owned by the township, and we have all of our salt trucks are there, all of our maintenance on our salt trucks, fire trucks, that all takes place.
So we didn't miss anything?
No,
as
no.
far as the conversation?
Absolutely, yeah, it's something that is,
Okay.
yeah, something that we internally had talked about, and it's something that we feel will actually bring a good presence to the area. You know, if we go through and
Is that a cue? Is that a cue?
that is not
Last
us.
call.
That's floodlights.
Everything went out.
Support for it to consider it, but now we have to color that and get some sense of what it is and how extensive it is. You can also see that as related to, we saw a lot of interest in a more permanent structure for the farmer's market. And I think all of us were caught by the number well over 60%, maybe not well over 62% or something of the communities use the farmer's market, and it's rated high, which is a little bit, to me,
So we
that's
want to protect them all year.
right, and it's part of the personality, if you will, what this community is about. Seems to be important. Well, now you're seeing some kinds of facilities that can serve maybe related or similar purposes. A community room, nature center, a farmer's market. It's not going to be a farmer's market 7 days a week. So I'm seeing a very intriguing discussion around how that kind of space can serve multiple purposes that have all come up as a fairly high priority in the survey. Not the walking trails or the nature natural areas, which walking and biking trails are always on the top of every survey, it seems, but you combine it with what's going on in Deerfield, it's putting a little bit more emphasis in this township on the natural areas, the natural recreation, walking in the woods, not just trails along the street. So I'm already seeing how that's going to color this final plan to be a little different from anybody else's because of what the township, the population here is interested in.
Well, one of the things too about the community building, the administration building, there are several communities out there that you can take a look at, and that complements a park. So if you look at Anderson Township, their building is built in the middle of a park. Wyoming is the same way. Who's the other one there that we looked at? Evendale. Evendale, they have their park surrounded by. So several areas, it really can start to bring that park a lot more activity and actually get you what you want in those areas. So there's a lot of good examples out there where a building like what we're talking about, it complements a park and it works well. Actually, City of Montgomery is the same way.
If it saves you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year because you're not leasing or renting, I mean, that gives you the opportunity to upgrade police and firefighting equipment, more personnel, make the community safer. I mean, that's something that I can understand and support. So, but if it's just something that everybody wants a brand new spanking building with 22nd century technology, then that's not a very fiscally responsible move.
Agreed, yes, that's something that we definitely have to get with the community and make sure that they understand the numbers, and we do have all those numbers ran, and it's very logical when you see the numbers that you would not continue to lease the space that we're
Just an
in.
example of using Evendale, you know, I mean, like you said, it's right there, and they got parks behind it, and it's constantly being used. There's always people going in and out, using the facilities and stuff like that, so it is something that you know, the community takes advantage of.
It can hold, I've been there for a number of different kinds of events, some that we leased space for, and some that were community events that you would otherwise hold in your township hall. So it's done a fairly creative job of putting a nice park program together in that park.
Are we gonna be able to do our groups?
Well, I'm looking at the floodlights that are on, and if we move our boards over towards the floodlights,
To where they're facing it.
yeah, so they're facing that, and I have some lights over at the office I can run and get that will even give us more light. So if you guys want to break up into groups and go ahead and move the light towards there, I have two really good lights that will provide us some good light over here. So let me run to the office and grab those. They'll take me like 10, 15 minutes to get there and back. If you can go ahead and get started there, and I'll be going to those lights.
And, you know, it takes half that time just to get organized.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Good.
We're running out of time.
Yeah. What we're going to do, we were going to try to break into just two groups. The size of this group, two groups is ideal numbers to talk about these things. We like to have 8, 10 in a group because you get a good dialogue. So what we'd like to do, have one group start in that corner on Kingswood site. We weren't going to start over there, just in terms of the parks that seem to be the most important. So what I'm going to suggest we do is grab those boards that are there and bring them to the back here so we can work these two corners. And this one is what we've defined as community parks in our draft park classification. And because we don't have any lights right now, I encourage everyone to take a look at the website. There's a draft park classification on there. The idea is there are neighborhood parks. There are the HOA, the small parks that are kind of leftovers from development projects. There are neighborhood parks, which usually serve an area within a half mile of the park. You're there for an hour or so. It's a quiet retreat. Community parks are much more involved. They're usually more active. 4 or 5 major things go on in each park. There could be 10 to 50, 60 acres, and people could come from over a mile away. And then those are the 3 main ones. And then we have special use parks, and we have natural and open space parks, which are very important to Deerfield. And that's what those boards in the back were, to look at those parks and think about how we can deal with those. So what we'd like to do is start with Kingswood and start with the parks that are listed as community parks, and that's really Cattell, Carter, and Fleckenstein. Did I miss one, Chad? Or Stephanie? Yeah. Cattell, Carter, Fleckenstein. Did we have a 4th one in that group?
It's just those 3.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And those will be over here with Kingswood.
Okay. Now, Kingswood is a size property that's really a community-wide park resource. But right now, it's not really a park yet, so it's not. It's its own animal. So we'll start with those 2, and then we can switch, and we'll have the open space. We can talk about that. Let's just see how we can do. Markers up here. You can see where all of these sit in the township and where your usual, your life takes you, and why you might not know some of them exist. But it also shows you a little bit about the distribution, and when we get to the final plan, we're actually going to map out the service areas of all these parks to see where there are holes, where people are not being served or where they're overserved. So anyway, you look, we're talking Kingswood at this station. That is sitting right at the center of the township. It's also right near, some industrial development and the interstate. This is a piece of property that could have pressure on it from every kind of use you can imagine.
Okay, then how current is that aerial of Kingswood there?
That
Is that a couple years old?
it's
or?
about, I think it's a 17 area.
I believe it's 2017. This is the
Okay.
latest that the township has.
The road is now completed to the roundabout here. That is in, there's a, this is a
It's
drainage.
ArcGIS. It's ArcGIS, yeah.
There's a little bit more defined stormwater basin here, but I guess that is showing a building there that's the cleared site. So otherwise, this is pretty current. With the road coming through here, there's a low area, you can actually see from the fill pattern, there's a low area right here.
What's this triangle down here? Is that part of Kingswood right there? What is that?
That is actually part of that property. And it's a piece of leftover open space. And there is, when you classify open space, it can range everywhere from open space that you walk in, you can, it's the passive discussion that we had, to special natural features, to a conservation area that it's preserved because it's important for habitat and wildlife.
So that could be like a little wetland area.
It could be, or it could just be a preserve. There's
But right now
it's too
it's just
small to
sitting
do.
there?
It's just sitting there.
How big is it? Is that like 200 by 400 or?
Pretty good eye. It's I don't think it's more
Just
than a
curious,
half
just
acre.
curious. So we're still worried about everything on the other side of the highway for Kingswood?
That's right.
Okay,
So, survey told us that people are in favor of bringing recreation activity into the park, but maybe not a lot of programming as much as self-program activity. But if you really listen to that survey, there's still a lot of flexibility in that. So we thought it would be good tonight to talk about this a little bit. And maybe I should take you back to that board for the moment, which is, Janet, this is an idea. There are two factors happening here. The township has taken a look at developing the space needs, or the building program, if you will, for an administrative complex, police station. How much space is really needed, and what kind of space seems to make sense for a community room. We're not trying to compete with or supplement even Mason. What you're trying to find is something that it's contained within the township that works with the township. Now, I sat in on some of the meetings, but what this is diagramming, first of all, is that program. And then if you're going to try to put it on a piece of ground, why not test it at Kingswood to see what kind of an impact it has. This is the farmer's market. This would be about the space you would need for an administrative building, maybe a two-story building. This is a reasonable size space for a community building. You might have a large room, maybe something close to this size, maybe not even this big, and a few breakout rooms, smaller rooms. This was something that came out of I'm not sure exactly how it came out of the programming discussion, but like a community garden. We did see, we got a lot of feedback that the community gardens were important to this community, and it seems consistent with everything else. We didn't ask us, well, the community garden does show up in one or two of the questions in the survey. And this is the service entrance. Now with this circulation, the natural access seems to be from the back, not on Irwin Simpson, but there is access from Irwin Simpson. So the idea is to say, well, okay, if we did put all this program on the park, how much land would it take up? Look at the amount of green area down here it's not even using. So it's not a lot of program, but it is a development program on a park that some people would like to see stay perfectly green and natural and undeveloped. So part of our process here as a group is to just take a look and see what's, knowing what the survey said, it's still what the group here thinks it makes sense. Let's take a look at that piece of ground and think about, what ideas do you have that you think might really make sense at this piece of property. It's right in the center of the township, and it's one of the biggest green spaces left in the township. I think that is a significant thing that I'm hearing. It's a big piece of green. Now, it may have been all developed as golf course at one time, but it's still a green space.
What part is left of the parcel to be green, to be kept green, if you do
Well,
that?
if you look at this, let's take that over here. That area sits right down in here. So that diagram uses this part of this area. It leaves that green and it leaves all of this.
Are there no other options for land for a community building and administrative offices?
Well, I think
I like
Joel
that
can.
barn at that other park. What do they use that barn for? I think
Well,
we
that
had
is another
before.
piece
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
that's one of the things that has come up
That could
repeatedly,
be a
is what do we use
beautiful
it for?
interior space.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? I wanted him to answer
Well,
my question about.
I think Joel can answer that a little better than I can, but there's nothing saying, that program could go in other places.
And one of the reasons I'm asking is because I guess I'm kind of a diehard, just leave it as it is. But, so I'll just admit that right here. But also, this area off of,
This is
Irwin
Irwin
Simpson. I'm having a little trouble getting oriented here, but there's a neighborhood on the other side of 71
Yes.
with, and that's, I don't know how in the world you all are gonna make this work without redoing a number of the roads and things like that, and somehow try to avoid this poor neighborhood that already gets tons of traffic, and you know what I'm saying? It just, and then adding a community center and a police department, and, I mean, I just.
Well, that's a valid point to bring up. It's one of the reasons, and the transportation guys would say, well, that's why that road had to go through the park. Well, your point, I know that road very well.
Do you know it? Yeah.
Yeah, my son used to live at the other end,
Yeah.
and so I've driven that thing for years. So I understand what you're saying, and I think you really do need to look realistically at what the traffic impacts would be, because, that's people's front yards. It's
It is, it's
two-lane road.
already.
And even right now, getting in and out of the farmer's market is tough because you've got, your visibility isn't real good.
I know one of the discussions that came up with that road was, well, now you have a safe way to get in and out of the farmer's market. The traffic guys that were involved in that design apparently see that as the primary access to the farmer's market property. And there's something to be said for that. Like I said, I know the road well. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I think that's a concern worth noting. The visibility of it there, its presence in the township seems to be a real positive, the farmer's market. And, I think the question is, okay, if we say we don't want an administrative center there, what about the farmer's market? Is that still a good place, or is that maybe not the best place? And then what are some other things you might do in conjunction with, in other words, with what's there now? What do you do with that? So a lot of comment
Just
about.
something to think
So,
about.
so a big thing is keep it raw. That's
Yeah,
what
so
we're saying. Keep
I can just start writing down, and part of my handwriting, I'm not very good at handwriting, but if there's any other ideas of anything that you'd like to see at Kingswood, we can list those, or if it's things that you don't want to see too, we can just kind of go down and we can take a turn.
One of our outcomes is just what Chad's saying. Let's just try to make a list of whatever,
Yeah, let's
everything
just
that you think
brainstorm.
is appropriate, and then maybe some things that aren't.
Some cyclocross guys this past weekend, they were kind of scouting the park to make their trails because there's a big event coming the end of this month for them.
Yep.
And they referred to some of the physical features of the park One of them was the camel, the other was the mutant camel, because it has 3 walkways, one was an enchanted forest. I don't remember all the things that he called them, but if those could be incorporated, you know, you're just saying a simple little sign, you know, like for a trail that we're walking through, this is, you're going to the enchanted forest now, or you're going through the camel. And the camel would be good for the sledding. People were asking about sledding areas. Those little hills would be good for sledding and things like that.
How about like
And it used to be a golf course, you could have the,
amphitheater?
All right, there we go.
Total natural, you know. Just,
Yeah, it looks like it's a piece of the landscape.
yeah.
Joel,
now you know
or Stephanie, are we
there's an
correct?
amphitheater going over at Deerfield Town
This is
Center.
What's that?
An amphitheater is going over at Deerfield
Where?
Town
It's gonna be
Center.
small.
There's there's property back there.
Oh,
that hasn't
okay.
been developed.
Yeah, the new,
So that's
not the
gonna-
town center,
Well, it's kind of behind the town
the
center.
district. So the township.
The shopping center, Deerfield Town Center, all across Mason Montgomery Road. They're developing part of that back there where Talbot's and all that used to be.
District of Deerfield.
The district, yeah.
That property.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be an amphitheater there in those plans, so.
So who's paying for that amphitheater?
Well, I don't know, but it's Deerfield Township
It was like an
property,
acre of it, yeah.
so.
That should factor in all these plans.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm
Because
looking at.
if nobody knows that something else is going into a commercial space, you want a new one here. Do you want this here if there's gonna be one 2 miles
Of all
away?
the different amenities throughout, and making sure that we're able to reach, you know, certain segments of the population and everything like that. And that's a part of the presentation we didn't really get to today, was like the benchmarking data and how everything compares, but really what just the overall offerings are and how that compares to what's offered now, what the community desires. So for Kingswood, so far, we've got a natural amphitheater, a dog park.
Exactly,
What
the
are some
pond that's
other
there,
ideas?
We need
and
to
keep
talk
it-
about this pedestrian access across the road.
some
You see something here,
continuity
Rob, is
if
that gonna be
that
a
whole
tunnel, is that
section
gonna
of
be
So
a walkway?
this is still very much a
that would
concept.
be,
Yeah,
So-
but we've always been talking about, we need some access, unless the road's blocked off for any
So there-
time.
there's-
that's us, but it's,
Potential, and what Bruce is trying to get at with the topography, potential to put a tunnel underneath the road.
and I don't know if
So
it
that
still
would be a
is,
tunnel.
but
And that's the
about
easiest thing
6
to do
months
for
ago,
ADA
that whole
accessibility.
area is under contract to be blocked by
If you
somebody.
do an overpass or a pedestrian
I don't know if it still is.
making it ADA
Yes.
accessible is
So-
very complicated. It takes up a lot more room. And if you can use the topography to your advantage and do a tunnel.
Not a
Okay, so
subdivision,
then right
it's
on
more
our list that we
of a
support
commercial
the
development.
pedestrian tunnel under the roadway.
Yeah, not industrial, more of office type stuff.
Water, flooding, concrete.
Well, what they liked about it, it's like there, is the fact that it had the park behind it. So they were not wanting
And then I
anything
wanna
else to
find
happen to
out
Kingswood. They wanted
what
to see,
percentage is proposed to be
yeah,
this
because it was
administrative
a
center,
good amenity for their
what
organization.
percentage of the park?
I forgot the name of it. We had our office in it down in
So in
Blue
terms
Ash,
of that
looks out
acreage, I
over
mean, you know,
Summit Park.
just,
I
I would have to
Those
ballpark
offices
it right
got
now,
to
but
be
as we develop the plan, so right
really
now we're still listening.
prime when that turned into
But as we
a park.
develop the plan, this is the concept.
In fact, that's what
being
built the
developed.
third office.
So, and I'm guessing that that's maybe
Do you
20
know the acreages? I was told this was like a 30-acre piece along the
I
side of
think
the road,
the whole
and this
southern
is
part could
7.
be about.
In the top corner is a small parcel of
So
land
that's
that the
everything on the
township
side of
bought
the road.
5,
So
7 years ago.
70%.
Was it 12? Oh,
Yeah.
man. So 12 years ago, it was just a residence, they tore it down, it's still open, and there's people on, and it's right there at the new,
With the road divided.
Yeah, we bought that at the same time we bought Kingswood. It was all bought as one. It was from 2 different people. The White family sold Kingswood, and the Altmeyer family
So if this were developed,
sold the other
about
property.
70 acres of park.
Yeah,
there in the corner.
yeah. So this is, so if you look right
For
here,
whatever people are.
the property line is about right here. And it went right in front here.
Take a look at it later on.
And so there's 2 parcels, 2 5-acre parcels there. Is what was there. So, what they purchased those now, the road goes almost right where the house used to be at. There's 2 houses there, actually. So it was owned by the same person.
So, and you're saying that might be another option for police?
Well, that was
So for one of them, I mean, to reduce the
we're trying to put
footprint
down
for each
anything.
place.
There are no bad suggestions tonight. So just anything you want to.
Yeah, passive recreation. So, access, yes.
Yeah, I saw that you had traffic and impacted neighborhoods, but we need better access and parking for Kingswood. The only parking we have is up there by the farmer's market, so if you want to access the other 78, you definitely have to have your pedestrian way or folks. I mean, because everybody's gonna use that way. There's no place else to park on new access somehow.
So what about having like little carts, like hot dogs,
The roundabout
ice cream?
over there.
So like food vendors.
There's a
Yes,
third way, so as you're
yes,
coming off,
but
there's
not
there's
in a
another road
permanent
that leads you down
structure,
towards
having
this
like
building
a
right
park,
here.
like
So the
down
primary way to get
on
into
weekends
those
or-
areas
right, on
is
weekends.
to come over
That could be viable, especially if there's, you know, some other activities going on,
Right,
that generate the
right.
population,
and use
then
that
those
to
vendors
go
can
away.
actually, you know, lose a profit.
And bench.
Plus they have to,
Yeah, that's a great idea.
they have to pay their permit.
You would force all the traffic to go that way.
Because I mean, if I live here,
You know, I've seen in several places, you know, they have food truck rallies. There's a
Right,
bunch of
but
trucks there, and just a whole
if you
bunch of
live over
different,
here, you're most likely to go that way anyway,
options for
but
folks to pay for
the
them.
traffic that might be
Tables set up, bales of hay,
up in
or
these areas or
even
even
pallets of
here,
wood,
they're,
you know,
they're
that
having
stacked
a
up
way
that
to
people
get
can
into
use
the
as
park other
tables.
than coming.
It's kind of,
That's
it's a fun
that's really
experience.
Oh, it's so fun.
So the traffic that's already coming here is not gonna, most likely not gonna change much.
So when you say food vendors, can you put like,
for years.
a kiosk or a movable cart or whatever, so it's not just food vendors?
In your development.
I want it better
So,
defined,
I guess,
because I don't want to
if you've ever
build
driven,
a huge structure.
rush hour.
This is
anything,
kind of a mobile
well,
idea.
It's crazy, so I can just,
It's kind
I
of
don't-
like
it's just a
the hot
concern I
dog
had, and if I
carts
lived-
that you
if I
see
lived
in New
there, I
York
would be
City.
very, very
That's the kind of thing. They also sell gelato or ice cream during the summer, those kinds of carts.
all of this, I mean, but I guess I wonder, is there
You have to remember at Kingswood, though, they only have the one road there.
work? Does it have to be a
I
new
know,
building?
this is a concept building.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Idea
they actually did an
generation. They'll
extensive study on all those.
evaluate the
And
ideas
there were at one point some other properties that were
So,
already.
any other ideas for how Kingsway can be used and help serve the
But there is
community?
some parcel, because
Improve parking and access.
Yeah.
I'd like
Yeah,
to
that
name
definitely
our
would happen.
trails,
So,
or actually
that makes
identify
sense.
the trails.
property that we already own.
A lot of
So
the old,
which makes
you
it
know,
more attractive to build
golf
there.
course holes still have their little trails
So
there.
it's something that's
So is
very.
the town park, is that kind of more?
And that way you could mark like this, the 18th hole trail is 0.7 miles or something on one of those little, you know. So if you're actually tracking and you don't have a digital thing, you can just look at that.
Yeah. Great. Good ideas.
That one, Steve, Kingswood down across by the highway, that one.
little triangle?
Yes, keep that a nature preserve with a butterfly garden, bird watching, sanctuary, kind of untouched.
The only thing is people can't get to that, like, is the highway. You know?
Well, that's why you keep it in nature preserve.
Right.
There's a need for butterfly gardens because there's a problem with monarch butterflies. There's not enough milkweed for them to feed on. I mean, there's a lot of
Butterfly gardens are great.
poison ivy at Kingswood. That needs to be addressed.
The other thing is, Sanger Brewing is right here too. So the thought is that, you know,
Butterfly gardens. What else? Any other ideas?
Can you put bird watching on butterfly gardens? Because I know that goes on in Sharonwood and Vinwood, but it would be nice to have. So it really emphasizes. Thank you.
definitely good comments. I mean, like I said, anything.
You know, any other park amenities that we'd like to see? You know, let's kind of ignore the development side of Kingswood, but, you know, in terms of a park, you know, right now it's just open space and trails.
You got that nice lake there.
Okay, any thoughts for how we could use that? Or-
Are there two ponds? I thought there were two ponds.
there were kind of two. They're right next to each other. There's the big one and then the small one, which you can see.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The small one's kind of nasty right now, that's right.
Yeah, and those could be, you know,
The big one, yeah, needs attention.
any ideas
It's one of
for?
those fountain things
Oh, yeah,
that
aerated.
whatever you get, you know, goes on the top of the park. And you can't do anything.
Right there.
It's a growing park up here. It's underutilized. How about going up
Ponds,
there?
any ideas for things
Say,
like to see?
try to keep it natural.
Yeah, keep it natural.
Some nice trails around. You
There's a lot
can
of
even
ducks
do,
around.
you know, like the nature centers, sometimes those wooden trails that go out part of the wall.
Oh, kind of like a little boardwalk?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that would be good, because there's lots of holes around that pond there. You gotta be careful when you're walking.
Thank you.
And benches, because we've seen people fishing and they just lay their stuff on the ground, so a bench would be good to.
Or even just throughout, so if you're.
Yeah, because you, yeah, just open more here. This one is talking about the community
Picnic
park.
tables.
You have Carter
with shade, so under trees, kind of in the park spread out.
So your comment about.
Are we pretty sure that there's gonna be a permanent pavilion for the farmer's market, or do we need to continue to add that to the list?
I would definitely.
I don't think we need to.
Permanent pavilion for the farmer's market, that can be used year-round, and then that can be used for other things too, like if you want your wellness program or a little nature talk type
Especially when it's cold.
thing.
A multi-venue building.
There, that's a good idea, that's a good idea.
Absolutely on target for what you're using it for. So
Yeah, stuff like that,
this is
not just
fairly
the
new.
farmer's
There
market.
probably aren't, I haven't been seeing a lot of people talking about changing.
So
it, but
we've had some interest from theater
It's on the
groups,
table, I think
for
about it.
either the multi-purpose
Well, are the
building.
fields
What
pretty
is the
well
thoughts on the
used?
theater?
Yes, I mean, should try, you know, that.
Well, more so like
Soccer and baseball.
for kids theater, like there's a few groups, the Mason Theater Group, I forget the name of it off my head, but
That's one of
they
the
are looking
challenges
for a
here.
place to go as well.
think
So
it's great. Good shape.
a theater group, so that could be part of the
I
multi-use
guess the
building, or
courts
you
get a
think
good bid
that would
use,
be
don't
more
they,
of a
Steph?
They do,
standalone place.
especially because,
Multi-use, I don't think anything needs to be standalone unless it's being used 5 to 7 days a week, you
Okay.
know, like the bathroom.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Now,
so-
I was wondering about that barn at Fleckenstein.
Yep.
Can that be changed into a community type building, or is that just strictly for
It's
park
storage right now,
maintenance?
it is park maintenance right now, but if we end up building and expanding this building right here, we would look at that. The thing about that though is it backs up to a lot of houses right behind there, and when those folks moved in, that's not what they were.
The barn?
Yeah, the barn, so if you put activities there, there's lights on now, there's people coming and going, people who backed up to that, they may not be happy with.
That's one of the things that you don't have that. Department's been struggling with. for a
Yeah,
long
so
time. We're still gonna have
this is
to-
just the
we have to
barn
try to
being
Well, that
like-
other woman was talking about
Look at
the
this, look at this park. You've got
residential on the other side of the
It's- you
highway
just
and
got
how that would impact
all
our
have
traffic.
pretty much new facilities.
So I don't know where
So the thought there would be that we would, the roundabout up here, it's not shown on this
You know,
drawing.
part of what we're trying to
That's
do
where
is
you
come up with
make all the
ideas.
entrance.
So the entrance would
Obviously,
come off that roundabout, and then
It's-
we
it
would
serves-
eliminate
it's-
this, or it might
serves
just be
you
an
know,
access
as
for
a staging area to
coming
maintain
into
the facility well, and that is important. But,
traffic up
For
there.
ma-
So
is
there
it
would
just
be
maintenance,
a gated entrance that would
machinery in
come
there,
in,
or
just
what?
Is that
Right
program?
now,
our trucks that come in.
Excuse me?
So that would be one thought.
Yeah, that's what I had, that's what
That's
I
just
have
a
on the,
Connect all
on
the way
the
down to your
assessment.
road.
So in other, anything.
Wait, I'm sorry.
I guess I'm saying, where the roundabout is,
Yes.
if you're gonna have to give yourself access to farmers market, so will that part come all the way down?
It's already stubbed there.
All the way?
Yeah, so it comes like right this
If
way
you look,
towards the
what the
building.
house doesn't show you is the.
Yeah,
On
it
this
does.
drawing here, you can see it, see where it's going, with the arrow going towards the building.
Which is good in some ways,
So
in
if-
other ways you are.
So it's not a road yet, the arrow is just the proposed
It's there, it's already, the
road?
road is here to this point.
It is.
There would just be access. It wouldn't be a
Oh,
through
it
street.
stops right there,
Yes.
I understand.
So it would-
Okay, thank you.
It would go into that parking lot for the
There's a hedgerow remnants
Yes.
here, and this is evergreen trees. So I think you've got a very effective buffer for a community park
So
next
yes,
to
that's,
the neighborhood. What you don't really have
what that is for Kingswood here.
taking advantage of some of these for access.
Okay, I'm not sure why, I don't recall anybody saying gazebo at our other meetings.
By the same
Gazebo is up on the right there.
You've got a whole
Yes. It
cul-de-sac.
is,
Did we talk about that in any of our other workshops?
So is this the kind of thing?
I don't know if we did
I
or not.
believe, I thought it came up last workshop.
Did it? Okay, I couldn't remember. I knew I've talked to some different people about stuff, so I couldn't remember if that was.
Yeah, that just seems new to me, so I was like,
So,
where did that
so
come from?
the thought on the gazebo there is to provide something there that people can use for like a wedding, overlooking the water up there, or fishing, or wherever it might be. It's just a gazebo to overlook that water feature up there.
Are those permanent? Are they
It
usually
would be a
permanent?
permit, yes. Yeah. Something like
So it wouldn't be
possibly.
wood, or it would be wood? It would be
A thought
pretend
that-
wood?
Yeah, a thought would be something similar to what you see over at Voice of America. There's that big, huge gazebo that overlooks the water there. Are you
I don't go
familiar
there,
with it?
sorry.
Yeah, I've been there. It's a big area. It's got pillars that come up that support the structure. And it actually is right on the water there, so it gives you a very neat look from whoever uses it. So
But is it on
It's
the
just one
road?
thought for that. Again, we're open to ideas though, if you have something that you
No, I just don't remember that being mentioned before, so I was kind of wondering where that came from, that's all. That's all.
I don't recall that.
What, do you think that the little hills, you know, like the 2 hill and the 3 hills could be sledding hills?
They could be, yes.
Or are they too small, or are they get torn up, or?
For the amount of snow we get here, it's not going to tear them up. It's just really the steepness of it. They prefer over at Columbia Elementary going down those.
Right.
And those are not as tall, but they're more of a range, so you get a lot of speed going down those.
Does anybody use Kingswood for cross-country skiing?
Not that I know.
Cross-country skiing?
Cross-country running, yes, but not skiing.
We don't have no snow usually.
Well, yeah, there's that.
That's the element that's missing out of that. So,
Okay, and I think we still want the nature, like trail skates
Yeah.
on
I put
Kingswood.
that on there, and passive recreation.
Then you can see how spread out.
Yeah, you're good, you're good.
Oh, yes. It's a real challenge. Now, here, a developer very nicely put a trail in.
So one of the things that was mentioned
So,
earlier that
you know, you start to look, well, can we come up that road a little farther? And there's a connection here. Maybe it has, you know, maybe it has to jog around a little bit. This is the kind of exercise we need maybe to blow this up a little bit more. But if you look at it from the grand scale, look at this. There's a small break there, and you're almost to Roberts. And you have a couple of ways to get there through the neighborhood. And then this, going Nixon, it doesn't really quite get down, but you get to Tylersville, and
it is.
this is the big blank in here. And the other thing we're not showing yet is
That's pretty much it right there.
the walkway along Mason Montgomery. And part of we're still pulling these pieces together. But
but eventually, out of this process,
going with this.
we will.
Well, anyway, you've got a lot of potential along that right of way. This is another community, but that's your challenge. How do you get from down here, up here, or up here? And Mason Montgomery looks like the best route. But if we could take Muddy Creek, I can't remember where it goes down here. I think it, if I remember right, it comes off of here, but you have Muddy Creek, you have an off-road. We get down here to Cattell. One of the things we heard, this came out of focus groups we had. All we've seen on surveys is we just need more connectivity. We have people here who really have a hard time getting to the park. So,
This is not the way we usually have to go.
so this, I think this speaks to the connectivity issue very much in Deerfield Township.
So that one's not as old.
Really nothing much there. Whereas Landon's full of the trail system, but we're not necessarily connected in real well. There's a power line easement you can see coming across here. And
So you turn left, there's a parking area
there's,
right here.
and then you have the trail up here. There's some links that could start.
You come right up here to this.
I mean, we very quickly get into another community, but the interface is important. Coming across Kings Island, I don't know.
Well, how do the power lines impact any kind of development underneath them?
It goes around it.
You can put walkways underneath them. I've seen athletic fields underneath them. You can't build any
Well, we
permanent residence.
have them right in the park there at Lincoln.
Yeah, 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 we're coming right across it, like that.
All these little
But
dotted
in
yellow
terms of
lines
use
are
underneath,
different trails.
it's not a problem.
A lot of different trails you can.
Do any of you know of some connections that you already know of in the community that could be, or where there's land available that we can get some connections that we don't have
You
yet?
think when you first get there.
Now, tell me why this is dark.
Oh, this is Mason, this is Deerfield Township. So we screened this back.
Mason's right, kind of right in the middle of it.
Mason's right in the middle. And
figure this is all
Mason has been
subdivision,
investing
this is
in
school,
a trail system.
This is here,
But,
so no matter where
and
you
that's
go
important
there, if you
to,
just walk back up.
you know, when you start thinking
you're
about
gonna
how
get
can
back
we
to
work our way up and start to tie some of the township back together.
You might get an extra steps that day, but it's,
I
you
know
would
that here, so
eventually
I'm
make it
here,
back either this
and I can
subdivision,
walk my
this
dog all the
subdivision,
way
or
to Mason
back to the
Montgomery,
park.
Yes.
So as long
across,
as you,
and then to get
the
to the
river's
park.
down there and you
I
head
don't
back
think
up the
there,
hill,
I
you're
don't
gonna
think there are
get
any
there.
sidewalks there.
So that's really what we have there. The other thing
That's one
we're able to
area.
do with this
There's
park here is
also,
there's baseball fields
love to be able to
that
walk
we
up
use
Kingswood.
for
So once you get on
sports.
the other side
So
of the
rather than have to go to the fields,
sidewalks.
we partner
Yeah.
with the schools and we can go to fields and we're not using them. So you figure school's out in June, so the whole summer.
And I think it'd be nice if those were marked too, because then you get to the intersection, you're like,
And there's actually
am I over? Done? If you, especially if you're a first-time user, you don't realize, okay, well, my trail ends, but I can go across the street and there's another trail 100 yards or whatever. Because none of those are
Yeah, well,
marked, are they?
yeah, this, actually, yeah, this is shown here, this walk, but in fact, you know, it's something like, we've got to dig into the,
Remember there being one, maybe there is.
It seems like you can,
can't we get,
that's Erwin Simpson who takes you back there.
Yeah, the older.
you can walk this now.
So there's different things
Oh,
with the grading there. It's more.
Well, if not there, you can at least come through here.
Yeah,
But I mean,
Yeah,
after you get.
okay, so that's not
That's not a
there.
road.
but you can walk, I think there's a straight shot there.
I'm just thinking, after I crossed
Is that all wooded?
Montgomery, I didn't notice that there were any.
I put it needs here, there's a gap. I'm pretty sure you're right.
There's a gap,
Yeah,
just a thought.
and,
See, like these also don't attach.
yeah.
What is the reasoning for that? Or did it just happen that way?
This is typical of trail development. You grab what you can get and improve it. And then you end up with gaps. The plan always tries to fill in the gaps,
Yes, there are
but,
maps online that
you know,
So I guess that's
it
one of
seems
the
like
things
this,
we're saying is
that's
fill
an
in the gap.
important gap.
And then on there.
And,
is which park you're
but
looking
the
at.
other thing
And
that
so you pick a Carter.
There's a
is
gap
is
here,
a
you
real
said.
challenge. The connectivity from these
Right.
neighborhoods is not that good, as I understand it.
You're right.
Now, you
Well,
live right,
Snyder Road's really, really bad for traffic, so.
yeah. You said you live right in here.
Uh-huh.
So for you, it's not hard to get to the park.
I just crawl under the fence.
Well,
But there's no walkway through, there's no
There's
access?
no access.
Oh, that's all
now,
right.
do you, but you, do you have sidewalks in the neighborhood?
Oh, yes.
Okay, because that's
And then there's a
important.
sidewalk that goes along Erwin Simpson,
Yeah.
and so that's wonderful access to.
So this neighborhood's connected,
Yeah, it is,
but some down here are not, as I understand,
correct.
is that right?
Yeah, there's, they walk, there's an easement along the,
Snyder
you know,
Road's a mess.
shoulder along Snyder. And you
Yeah,
walk
pedestrian
along the
wise.
shoulder, which is,
This,
Bikes,
that's not pedestrian friendly along there at all.
So but there is connection though to all the subdivisions. Isn't there, like, to the south of the park, Deer Run?
no, there isn't. There's not, there's no sidewalk from their, if I'm not mistaken, from their
think-
development to the park.
Right there where the Deer Run, that street into that neighborhood, it's like there's some grasses or something in the corner, and I think you could jog, there's a tiny little sidewalk shoulder.
I should, not a direct sidewalk, but
Right.
there's indirect pathways.
Yeah,
So if you
it's a little path,
walk
I
through
think,
there,
but I don't-
you'll go from Deer Run over to the next subdivision, and it connects into.
Oh,
So
okay.
you wouldn't be out on Snyder Road, but if you were inside the subdivision, you could walk around. So Snyder Road would be, so you're talking more of a direct one on Snyder Road.
Yeah.
You can actually get to Deer Run and then the next subdivision over, I forget the name of that subdivision. So, yeah, so.
Oh, it's time
to adjourn.
Okay, that's good.
The larger map itself shows us in the,
I guess someone has to put the switch or something.
That's something that actually.
I'll ask forgiveness in advance if I hit you over the head with the board.
I tend to break things.
Okay, well, here, you know, you can clearly see
Oh, okay.
this circulation system,
Yeah, I thought that
and
went
that takes you up.
Yeah.
This is what I was thinking of, yeah, that whole thing right there
But,
is all.
well, now,
Here to here, that's my, and he says that there is a sidewalk right here, but I don't,
this is
must
look,
be a
this is the
sidewalk.
aerial, yeah.
it must be,
Yeah.
so.
But
I don't
now,
recall
on,
that being there, I just remember that little,
Yeah, me
this
too.
little thing right here, so.
on this side of the road, it does not doesn't look like you have.
No, there's nothing
And there's no
there.
connection down here.
No. Of course, you know, we're talking about any additional property. Who owns this farm that
That's Nator.
Natorps? I thought they leased that property.
No, they do lease it. This is the Scruggs farm.
So whenever they want to sell it, we need to say, let's buy it.
Yeah, that's right, Nator is leasing.
It's the Scruggs. They own that property.
Strug?
Scruggs.
This farm over here, Natorps leases that land. That's the sunflower, yeah. So,
Oh, yeah, the lights are on.
so whenever that would be a property to pay people, and you want to sell, we'll take it from you for the park.
Landscape.
Well, there is some interest to check it out online.
This church has first rights to purchase that.
This piece up fit
Really?
the criteria really
They have
well.
first right of refusal on the whole tract.
Cost a little money.
Because this was this was that land. The land belonged to them originally when they bought it from
And that was
Betty,
was that for school or
possibly a school building or
athletic
just
fields and stuff?
to increase the church. They were hoping to do educational.
We can educate with nature, right?
And we, you know, we're going to
Well, that's one of the things, did they get to that last one, or?
Is the township considering buying more parkland?
So you're
Well, that's why we're looking at some of these other properties that.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we are going to do coming out of the survey, which is really we're just getting our hands around it now, and tonight's meeting is we're going to do what's called equity mapping. What that is we'll through using GIS to get it pretty accurate. We'll take each one of the parks as it's classified under the definitions that we have now. We may have to modify them a little bit, but a neighborhood park, 1 mile, or half mile.
We'll typically do it based on whatever your current level of service is.
Yeah.
And that's part that we're defining, because we'll look at what parts of what other communities are doing, the survey, and then what national practices are. And what it's going to come out to is a certain number of recommended level of service. And then we're going to reflect that back on a map that says, all right, Kingswood Park, you're classified as a X park, which means the level service is Y. So it's going to be a visual representation of Kingswood represents this many people. When you do that across the system, like park typology, you can start seeing where there's physical gaps of different park types, which is because for park classifications are classified because of the type of experiences that go on in those parks. The size, yes, too, but really the type of the length of stay, the type of amenities, and what you would expect.
So once you get that mapping, that's going to tell us right away if the township needs to be marketed. You can, and if you look at the benchmarking that we have that's out on the website now, Deerfield Township's doing pretty well on a per capita basis in terms of the total number of acres. But where they are and how you use them gets into the equity mapping. So there may still be, and I think we're probably going to find there are some gaps where people have to travel too far to get to a park.
It's the type of experiences earlier this week I was with another community that honestly they have all neighborhood parks, which is not bad. That's just what their system has, but they realize that they're
Which
missing
means
these.
what to them exactly? What is their neighborhood park? Is
So
that ball fields for kids, or is that
No, so
nothing?
like their neighborhood parks are typically lack of parking because they're close juxtaposition to neighborhoods, no restrooms because the expectation is you're coming from your neighborhood. So one or two kind of signature amenities, not really a lot of.
And the signature amenity might be just a nice playground.
Yep. But then they have these couple big sports complexes, but their community, when we did the survey and do all the analysis, is like, we're missing these larger community parks, like of nature, like 30 acres of trails and nature. And so their community, when you looked at it mapping and you looked at all the classifications, they're a neighborhood park system, which is nothing wrong, but their community was saying, but we're missing some experiences.
So they weren't really connected. Each
Right.
little subdivision, so to speak,
Right,
had their
and so
own
that's,
little park.
yep.
Okay.
And then their community is working on the connectivity of all that,
The
because.
connectivity and the park experiences that don't really fit in a neighborhood park, that, draw a bigger crowd. Sports complex is more of a community
Right.
park.
And if
but
if they adopt the classification and they have the MO that we're not going to put restroom facilities in a neighborhood park, then they wouldn't want to bring in something that's a big draw to that because they're not going to have the sport facilities for that. So that's why they classify it that way. So, and it also educates the community in saying this is the expectation for our neighborhood parks. Because
Real
this
quick.
is what you're going to find.
I'm sorry. Real quick, I wanted to get everybody up here because I know we are running out of time and I don't want to hold anybody up. This is Landon Deerfield Park here.
Oh, yeah, it's
and
important one to talk about.
yes, we wanted to definitely make sure that we got some feedback on Landon Deerfield Park. This park came up at our last steering committee meeting, and this park is actually not a township park. It's a Warren County park, but it's within the township and it services a wide variety of our residents here in Deerfield Township.
Is that the one we pay them for?
We do contribute towards the upkeep of the park. So each year we donate $35,000 towards Landon Deerfield Park, which is a good thing for us because for us to maintain this and do all that work would be
Only
a lot more
35,000?
costly. Yes.
Oh,
And
that's,
then-
I heard 100,000, so 35 sounds much better.
that's what we.
100,000 was too much.
I think we found, Ryan, that we
So,
find that this is, in a couple of ratings, the second most used park by township residents. So you get a good deal in one sense, but it's also ranks lower on the maintenance.
So with that, the people that are here, has anybody used this park before, or have you heard any comments on this that you would like to comment on? I have some things I want to talk about, but I want to hear from everybody here first.
It's been a while. I have used it. I do like the trails. I remember seeing the amphitheater, but just not sure what events are advertised
The
for that
amphitheater is down
amphitheater.
here,
Yeah.
and I know they do a
concert-
series, concert series there. And we have Movies in the Park. Movies in the Park kind of grew, so we had to move them away from there because the screen was so big it wouldn't fit down there.
Can I ask you to
But
just step
Oh, I'm sorry.
So where are you doing the movies now?
they're actually on the soccer field because the screen's too big to fit in there.
On the soccer
so-
field there
Yeah.
at Landon.
And Landon, yeah. So we do them at all the parks, so we do, I say all the parks, we move it around. So we do like two there, two Cadell, Flat, Roberts, we've done it in all of those parks. So with that,
So where's the access to this park? Because I'm going to want to go there this weekend. Right there? Okay. Is that the only access?
that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that leads me to one of my questions. It is so there are a lot of baseball fields here, and anybody who knows baseball or soccer or any of that, everybody gets here at the same time and leaves at the same time. This becomes a nightmare to try getting out of. The first person that tries to turn left here pretty much blocks the rest of the traffic back. So I was hoping to hear of some people who've experienced that, but I don't know that anybody here has actually been there. Kathy, you may have seen that.
It's a problem, as is Creekwoods, because so, they talk about how to, improve that. People coming out of that subdivision just north.
That's this one? Yeah.
So it's really a problem, because Montgomery Road just seems to get busier and busier. And then you've got the one-lane bridge that they're all kind of, going into from 2 lanes to 1 lane. It just is really hard to get out, in and out.
So that's one of the things, access, ingress,
Yeah.
Landon, that's a very good point. So we've looked at several different things on here, but, we possibly, tying into this street right here and making, so you would end up dividing the soccer fields out and running a road here and making it wider and possibly putting a traffic light there that would help get traffic in and out better. You'd still have the same amount of fields, there would just be, this road would go away and you would have more room for fields here and you would put an access point there. Other options, we're trying to see if there's any way of getting another access point out the back up to Sociable Foster, or somehow coming along and.
What's that white building up there?
That is the Kabiki Farm, I believe, unless it's sold.
Yeah, the riding stable.
Okay, that's, they have horses there. So that's private, it's not owned, but there is an easement through there.
That's what I was going to say. Can you get
Black
an
line
easement?
they put
It's
on here
already
is the
there.
power
It's-
line. It runs through that easement.
So most of those power lines, if you're just putting a road in, they'll work with you on getting access, as long as you allow them their same access to that easement. So we're definitely looking at that. We've also heard several things about pickleball and also about, what's it called, lacrosse? What is that?
Cricket.
Cricket.
Yeah.
Has anybody heard anything about those two sports that are underutilized? We have several people who have called me and asked, do you have pickleball? It's real close to tennis. It uses almost the same type of court. It's just smaller and different rackets, and I think the balls are a little bit different and everything. So has anybody heard any?
No, we've got pickleball courts there
At
at
Landon,
Landon.
okay.
What they did was they mark, and this is what a lot of, parks are doing now, is they're marking the tennis court. You can easily mark the tennis court
Yeah.
into a pickleball court, because
Excellent.
it's smaller, it fits inside a tennis court.
Now, have you had any, I've heard from a few people that issues with the tennis people really wanting to play tennis, not wanting to.
It's always a problem.
Is it? Okay, that's it. So that's, that they, you get the people there. So do you think we would need dedicated pickleball courts, or to use that sharing?
That
as a
seems to
better-
be the way to do it.
Yeah, you could,
Raise everybody.
not everyone's always using them all the time, so you can make
You
them
can make them
accessible for
sharing.
both. I think
Okay.
it serves the long-term benefit. Yeah.
Okay.
Because a lot of tennis courts are underutilized.
And that's definitely true until August, and then you don't have enough. So that's when the ATP comes to town. So,
But bringing up those sports makes me think, my neighbor complains because her son doesn't have a lot of places to go do the frisbee stuff.
So, and
Do
that's-
they have any, do we have any of that in Deerfield?
Deerfield
that-
does not. The
I didn't-
closest one that I can think of is the sports park over in Mason, off of Mason Morrow Mill Grove Road, which is to the north of town there. So if you go 71 north and get off of Kings Island, it's right up in that
Way
area.
up there.
So,
And that's only a 9-hole.
yeah.
Could that be
so-
something considered for Kingswood then, or?
We definitely could,
I have
yeah.
no idea what's involved with the frisbee golf thing.
We
If that means
can just use that as a general note.
100
for-
acres or
for
5
any-
acres?
They have big tournaments too, right?
They do, yeah. You can fit that really into any park because it's so passive. It's just a matter of you have area, it could be a area that's concrete, or it could be made out of mulch. It's almost like playing regular golf. You have a spot where you throw it from, and you just follow the frisbee until you get up to the fenced cage thing that catches
Do they
the
do
frisbee.
18 holes like a golf
They
course? or
can.
they-
If you got enough space, you can.
Oh.
If you get a good course, a really nice course, and Mason's is a nice course, but it's only 9 holes. If you're gonna build a nice course, you wanna get at least 18 holes, if not 27, for the tournament play. I see you want to. The Frisbee golfers want you to do that.
But then is the land exclusive then for that?
But
So it wouldn't interrupt with
Not
anything else?
really.
Most of them are around the perimeter of the properties that I've seen.
Yeah.
There's some that maybe go more in, but they try to use the outside
A
perimeter.
lot of them have trails that go through them, and Mount Airy Forest is one of the best ones in the world.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Learn something.
So you wanted an idea for that traffic clog for left turns?
Yes. Yeah.
What about doing a right turn only?
That is something that we could look at. There is a lot of traffic that does come from this way, so if
Right,
you made
right.
everybody go right, you have to figure out a way to get them to go back to the.
Right, somehow
back
get
east.
a U-turn or something?
If you made this traffic light, would you be able to make it be activity,
Timed.
activated, you know what I mean? So, you
There-
know,
there are
you want it
several
active
things,
during
yeah.
the ball game time, but not at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when nobody's there.
They have all that technology out there where they can make that so it.
So that could happen,
It could
okay.
happen, or some places, rather than doing it that way, they'll have a sheriff go out there at the busy times, and he'll manually change the lights, so when he sees it backing up.
So does he cost more money for his salary and insurance than the technology on the light? I
It
don't know.
depends. So if it's an on duty, somebody's already on duty, who's, already, off his beat, he'd come over and do that. It probably wouldn't cost any more, but if it's somebody who's off duty, who's getting overtime to
have
do
to
it, it
hire
would be
him
more
for it.
expensive to do that.
There's another park in the area that has that problem, Heritage Oak. That one's got a signal.
Oh, yeah.
But I understand that still backs up quite badly when
Yeah.
the games
Is
exchange.
that one on 42?
It's on 42, just up from Mason Montgomery.
So
The challenge there is topography and drainage. You
Right.
can't put another route in. The minute you get 2 ways in and out of a park like that, it makes a big difference. but this is somewhat limited.
Yeah, the other way you can do it too is Townersville Road, years ago, they had a traffic camera, and somebody from the office would control the signals from a camera that was showing them how much traffic was at that intersection. So when it started to back up, the person, I forget the name of the company who does it, but they do most of the traffic in this area. They were sitting in an office and just would turn the light whenever they wanted it to. So there's technology out there.
When you like that to
good.
be your job.
Yeah, exactly. I guess so.
I don't like that guy driving that truck. He's
Yeah.
getting red light.
Until it backs up and they start calling.
Then they start calling, you're
it's,
right.
Yeah, so it would be kind of cool, probably the first time you did it, to see how much control you had over traffic. But, going back to, not pickleball, what was the other sport? Cricket. We have had a large amount of people express interest in a cricket field.
I think they play that at Cottle. I think I've seen,
They do.
like on Sunday mornings.
It does. Unfortunately,
Do they play it on the baseball field?
They do, and it unfortunately it ruts out. The way that the cricket works is you take the ball, you have to have a pretty hard surface to have the ball bounce, and then when it bounces, they hit it with almost like a baseball bat, but it's more of a paddle. And when they do that, it ruts out the middle. So when they come to play baseball, you drag those fields to make it ready for baseball, and it messes up those. The other thing that happens when you rut out the middle, and then you get rain that night, and you try to play baseball the next day, your whole center is all filled with water. Usually you can drag that and get that field ready to go, but it's almost like you need two separate fields for that, just because it will cause rainouts if you, unless you have a turf field. Turf field might work for that, but it would be something. At this point, I'm not sure where we would put something like that, but it is something that Kingswood was talked about by a few people on that south side there, because there would be parking there. It could be something in that circle if there was an administration building there. It would be neat for some people to sit there and watch people play, because a lot of people don't even know what that is. So
Right. When I was at Cottle, I was like, what are those people doing? So,
yeah, so it could be something that could go into Kingswood or somewhere else, but just it requires
and then you
different
need a
size
sign.
field.
This is the cricket court.
Exactly. Yes. That's,
Come play.
Yes.
I
think
VOA Park has a cricket field.
VOA, it does. Yes, and theirs is a really nice one. It has a concrete area for them to bounce the ball, and it's specific just to
They've got
cricket.
signs. That's how I knew that they had one too, was seeing the signs for it.
Right. The people who have been using Cadell there have said that they can't get on that one because it's so busy there. So that's why they are using the baseball fields. So it is a sport that is
Do
growing.
I spy a revenue potential?
Say that again.
Do I spy a revenue potential?
Yeah, maybe. That's so it is a sport that is growing, and we do not have a spot to accommodate them right now. Unfortunately, they are using baseball fields to play the sport. So something that we, again, just from people who called in, want to take a look at. So that was it. Any other questions or on Deerfield?
How many people in this group know land in Deerfield, have used it?
It's not the coyotes in Deerfield.
There probably are.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
that's
ones
it.
back there.
That's it. Yeah, the other thing that we
Might be
had.
at the turret.
Oh, I've seen them in Norwood, so they're,
No, they're,
all
I don't think it's a
around.
problem in Landon. You hear them once in a while, but.
Are there any other parks that we want to go over or anything else that we want to discuss? We're past 8:30, but, we obviously missed some time with the power outage.
Right.
Is there anything else that we want to discuss or that you'd like to see that we haven't brought up today or tonight?
What about the Snyder House? What's going on there?
Yes.
Yes, at Cattell.
Did you have any specific things, or just you want an overview of what we did
Just in
there?
general, what's it used for? So it seems like the building wasn't in very good condition the last time I was there, and it seems small.
Oh, okay.
But it was several years ago, so I don't know what it looks like now.
The size of it has not expanded. In 2012, we did a renovation in there, and we'll
Okay.
probably look to do some more stuff next year.
Okay.
The building was built in the late 1800s, so it is the first part of it, not the whole thing, but it is an older building. So it does get used for a variety of events. We do Safety Town there, which is in the summer for 2 weeks. We do summer camps there, which are about 8 weeks long during the summer. And we also rent it out for a variety of weddings, birthday parties, graduation parties. Graduation parties are huge there in the summer months. Wedding receptions, showers, all those type things. Even people have bereavement celebrations there as well. So just
So it actually gets a lot of views.
It does.
And it was renovated recently,
It was.
2012.
Yes,
Okay.
2012-ish. I don't know
Right,
that year,
okay,
something
I've not
like that.
been there since it was
So we
renovated.
opened up a few walls to make the area some more open. Before it was
Right.
kind of
Boxed
boxy
up.
and you couldn't really have a good conversation because everybody else was in the other room. There was a wall between you. So we opened up those walls, put in some fluted columns in there, and
I bet
it
it's
actually
gorgeous.
looks a lot better. Next year we have some new renovations as far as the outside of the building, upgrading some windows, and just doing several different things to the Snyder House. So
good.
we're hopeful to get that in the budget for next year.
Oh, good.
It's also the Arts Alliance's office.
Very good point, yes. We also have a working agreement with the Arts Alliance. They provide a lot of programming to the township, and we have a very good working relationship with them.
Oh, good.
So, before I was talking about the group I was talking about was the Royal Theater Group out of Mason was the one that I was referencing when it comes to children's theater groups. So they are looking at finding a home as well. So that could be something that might work in that multi-purpose room. The Arts Alliance is another group too that might be able to use that room for some of their events because they have a lot of different types of art events, pottery classes, just a whole wide range of things that a lot of people probably haven't heard about. But if they have a location like that where they can do it, it would be a good location for them.
And the Royal Theater has apparently funding capabilities to actually build
Oh, do
a
they
building.
really?
Now, the thing to now to discuss is, how single purpose would that be and what kind of partnership? But there's a good potential partnership there.
So if you going back to what we had mentioned earlier, and I don't want to take too long in this, but if you were to look at that site that we talked about for Kingswood there, the south side of the road, if there was a group, and the Royal Theater is a very almost everyday type group where they have a lot of activity going on. Would that be something that we'd want to see in that area as far as for the arts part of it, some type of?
Can they connect with the Arts Alliance?
Well, they're a bigger group. They're it sounds like they're very well funded too, from what I've heard. They're able to actually build their own building. They're just looking for a site that's central. The Arts Alliance, the Snyder House is not big enough for them, so that's
Really?
just the Snyder House holds 100 people. They have several hundred people who usually come to their events, from what I've heard.
The Royal Theater does.
The Royal Theater.
Yeah.
So, is that something that
So do you
would-
need the theater piece and then all the background
A
space for
stage-
them
like
too?
a stage,
The whole-
yeah, so you
that's-
have-
So that would be the whole permanent structure would include all of that?
That is correct. And it could be that it could be used for multi-purpose stuff as well, but it would be more so a theater type setting, something almost like what you would see here, exactly like this, only it would probably have.
Did they
the,
approach the township?
They have, yes.
Really?
So they are.
And they're willing to build?
That's my
at their
understanding.
cost?
That's my understanding. They would work with the township on that. I don't know, I've not seen all the numbers on that, but that's something that they, or it sounds like they have the funding, they're just looking for a site. to
And it
build.
would be daily use or 5 days a week use?
That's, again, those details, I have not seen all those yet, but that's my understanding is that they have, the place that they're at now is in Mason, I think it's a leased place. They've outgrown that, so they would probably provide activity all day long, as far as what I've heard. Have you heard anything different, Jim?
I just know from experience, the Children's Theater of Cincinnati is located very close to my house, and that is absolutely used every day. So assuming it's a similar, type company, it would, their back office, or they'd be using it for rehearsals or things of that nature. There would be everyday use at that building, yes.
So wouldn't that be good for Kingswood?
That's the question, yeah. So that's one spot there, so, a theater group at a theater building
You're
at
talking about this
Kingswood.
one where you said the proposed building would be?
No,
would be
that's
it?
the administration building.
It would be
This
number 5.
It would be.
Oh, it would be this one?
A 5.
That location, you were saying some kind of a community use building there. So that theater would certainly fit into that category. And maybe you
Yeah,
share.
but if they need it every day, then the community wouldn't get much use out of it.
Well, let's step back real quick here. So this would be a community building that could go there, and then possibly they would go in this area right here. So
Or, maybe you can share the restroom core, a few things like that. So there's just, a lot of potential for teamwork and partnering.
I would say yes to this, the 30-acre part, especially that part right there in the corner. But I don't think it should go on the
north.
big piece
So,
at all.
so is it fair to say that everything on the north side of the road would stay pretty much
Nature.
passive?
Yes,
and
passive.
nature, people can use it for, hiking, biking, whatever they want to do in that
Exactly.
area, but nothing as far as team sports goes or,
Well, like
anything.
the cyclocross people, I mean,
Cyclocross,
that's,
yeah.
and how much money are them gonna pay? See, you need a sign. Come
Yes.
see the cyclocross race
They-
on
they-
October 27th
Well, they'll take
weekend
care
or
of
whatever.
Yes,
It's an
and
international event.
they have made great use of, so they work with the county on closing down the Innovation Way, and they have some great bicycle races there as well. So they are a very good partner that we work with.
I know Westchester has 2 or 3 of those events, and they shut down Liberty Way, and it's a
Yeah.
massive gathering. I mean,
Yes.
There's
Huge.
hundreds, if not thousands of people that